Welcome to the YDIDPOD podcast, where we talk all things sibling loss and grief. I'm Kat.
And I'm Kim. In today's episode, we are going to be touching on the lack of resources for sibling loss, going through the grieving process as a sibling, kind of just the aspect of how overlooked siblings are when this type of loss happens, and just the lack of support in general, and kind of some of the experiences that we had ourselves going through our own grieving process and what we got to learn. So lack of resources.
Yes.
Starting there.
There's a lot.
It is jarring.
It's scary.
It's
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I'm not someone who gravitates towards trying to get support.
I'm a resource girly. I'm a resource girl.
I don't know. I feel like I am that very stereotypical, doesn't ask for help, doesn't ask for support, especially, we're both older sisters. So it's that eldest daughter.
I'll figure it out. I
you
always do.
You just make do with what you have. Yeah. And I will say, after going through losing my brother and just trying to look to see what there maybe was, and maybe I would resonate with something, maybe something would call out to me, because as someone who is in the spiritual realm and in the industry of helping people, especially in things like personal development, it's always important to know some things are going to work for some people, some things aren't going to work. And also finding the resources and the guidance that you really connect to. And so knowing not only should there be resources, but there should be a variety.
Yeah, it should be an eclectic flavor of resources.
I should have options. I should have choices. I should be able to find people who have had experiences very different from me in sibling loss, and I should be able to find people who have maybe had a similar story, because it's not unique. It's not unique, and there are so many of us.
Yeah.
My experience at the time, again, this was 2019, podcasts weren't really a thing yet.
And if they were only on YouTube, mostly.
And also, that wasn't really my first thought. My first thought is a book or a support group.
That was my first thought.
There is one book, at least at the time. I don't know. I'm sure there's more. I think
I know what book that you're talking about.
I hope there's more now. One book. And then I joined some sibling loss Facebook groups. And that was the extent of that, which we'll get into. But what was your experience when looking for resources?
My experience. So I have a background in mental health. I have a degree in psychology, and then I've been working in the mental health field for give or take 10 years. 8 years is probably more accurate based on the break I took from work because of my loss.
Right.
So probably about a consistent 8 years in the mental health field. And I had been working in the mental health field when I lost James. I was working as a group home manager. So I was already waist deep. I had already been in the field for 4 years or so. When I lost him. So I definitely was still new in the field, but I knew that there were resources for things such as child loss, such as really resources for everything. They have support groups for literally fucking everything.
Right.
As they should, because that is what mental health is about, and that's what working in that field is about, is creating resources for people who need support and tools. But I was, when I tell you, quite literally floored, and also very personally offended because I'm a Scorpio and I take things very personally. But that there was literally not one resource, no support groups, whether it be on a Zoom, because it was also, I lost my brother in 2020. So it was peak pandemic. Nobody was doing anything in person anyways. So I was like, well, I'll at least find a Zoom group. No groups. No books.
You would think, especially at that time.
Especially at that time, because if you actually look at the numbers, we had lost more young people in the year of 2020 than years previously. And a lot of those were overdoses, and to to share. I didn't in our opening, but that is actually what my brother passed away from, was an overdose. So it was an epidemic at that point. I mean, it is an epidemic in this country right now. And the only book I did find I didn't resonate with because I believe it was the book that you just mentioned, because her experience was vastly different than mine. So there were some things that I could take there, but not a lot that was actually helpful. And then I remember my mom looking into journals, because there's tons of journaling prompts online. You could Google anything for a journal prompt, and you will find probably 10 PDFs that will fit what you're looking for. I could find nothing for journal prompts. And I remember my mom going online, I think to Amazon, and she was looking up journals, and she found this beautiful journal for mothers who had lost their sons. Very specific, not parents who have lost a child, which is still specific, but very specific to mothers whom have lost their son. And I remember going through the journal prompts because I was curious, having had a background in mental health. And they were beautiful prompts, and I thought that they were so thought-provoking and healing, yeah, so cathartic to really think through and work through a lot of what those prompts were. And I remember her being excited to go get me one online because she remembered seeing one that was labeled "Letters to My Brother in Heaven." And just that title, I was like, oh, wow, Letters to My Brother in Heaven. This is going to be a beautiful journal.
Opening a line of communication.
Wrong. The journal was blank. I get the journal in the mail. I'm so excited because I've been falling apart for 3 weeks now at this point. So I'm reaching for any life
Desperate.
raft.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited that this is coming in the mail. This fucking stack of empty paper with a beautiful cover on it that says "Letters to My Brother in Heaven." Babe, I could have made that myself.
Oh, man.
And that in and of itself probably would have been more of a cathartic art project than ordering it off Amazon. So all of that, the long way to say that there were no resources. There were none. And as somebody who worked in mental health, it pissed me the fuck off. It didn't just like, oh, that's wrong. No, I was very angry. Because we know enough. We have the education.
And it's just so surprising, I think.
Right.
Like, you would just assume.
Because, well, there's loss support for literally, like, I think that's what made me so angry about it, is I found grief support groups for parents who have lost their kids, of course there should be. Spouses who had lost, their spouse. Support groups for friends who had lost people. Of course, there's suicide support groups, but there was no support groups for siblings who had lost siblings. And that was just like mind-boggling to me. It's 2020. I'm not the only person who's lost a sibling. It's not even possible that I'm the only person who lost a sibling.
Yeah.
So how are there no resources out here?
And I think that to just kind of add to it as well is like, when we are talking about how overlooked siblings are, it's not to take away from the grief, especially of like the parents, right?
Oh God, yeah, no, that's not what it's about.
You can't put yourself in that.
It's not an either or.
Right.
And I think that's how and this is just my personal experience as a mental health worker, but I have found that our human condition is like very black or white, very either or, very this or that. And it's like, well, actually we live in a very dualistic world, and two things can be true.
Yeah.
So no, I think that's a really important piece, because it's not about feelings. Well, I think it is about feeling slighted. I was going to say it's not, but I think it is about feeling slighted. But it's not about feeling slighted and then also feeling like, well, you can't pay attention to these people because you need to pay attention to
I think about it this way, right? Like, if you lose a partner, you're widowed. My mom even found a word that means like a parent who has lost a child. She got it tattooed on her. There isn't a word,
right,
for when you lose a sibling. There isn't a word for when somebody asks you how many siblings you have and you have to decide on your feet if you're going to include them or not. If you're going to say right then and there that one isn't alive anymore. Like,
because it makes people uncomfortable too. Like,
it makes
that's
people
a whole
uncomfortable,
other thing,
and
but
also
it makes people so uncomfortable.
they're not asking for that.
Right. I didn't ask you a small, like, you know, what I was
this is small talk.
Right, exactly. What I was anticipating to be small talk, and you're like, oh yeah, well, my brother's dead, and now we're all just sitting there awkwardly staring at each other because I just trauma dumped on you, but I didn't trauma dump on you. That's the reality I'm living.
It's just the truth.
Right.
And there's not a word for it. There's not a descriptor. We don't have a label, right? And it is so triggering.
Yeah.
And it's so nuanced because I am not someone who wants to always lead with my experience with my brother, the fact that I lost my brother. But I also want to scream it from the rooftops because he was my brother.
I feel that.
And
he was so much in your world.
Important.
And now he's not physically in this world.
Right.
And I feel like it can be so easy for other people to just like, to not see that. And that's why I feel that we're like, I have a sibling. He still exists.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, my parents went through this thing which happened so quickly. Like, literally when people were sending cards at Brady's service, it was then my parents' names and the girls. My mom had never had that before because Brady was the middle child.
Right. So it was always
always
Kim Brady. And
yeah. And then it's just like, that was such a weird, like, all of these little changes
they're small
happen.
things, but they feel so big.
And I think it also is just the process of time, like the aspect of time. Everybody else kind of moves on and goes back to normal because it didn't have as much of an effect, or the relationship was different, the dynamic is different, and you're still wanting to scream that person is still your brother, and everyone's moved on and forgotten, or acting as if they've forgotten.
And that's how it feels. It does. It feels like people like move on and forget. Like, I even remember I had a family member at one point. When I first lost James, I was really lucky that I was working somewhere. Well, I guess it's a double-edged sword. I didn't have the best work-life balance, so I had a lot of vacation time saved up.
Right.
And they didn't have to let me take all that vacation time, but they were very gracious, and they basically were just like, you got 3 months saved up. If that's what you want to take off, do your thing. And I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was really lucky to have a place like that at work where they were able, or work at a place like that where they were able to recognize that 2 or 3 days of bereavement is not nearly enough to bounce back, really, from any loss, but especially something so close. And then,
which we're gonna do a whole episode on.
Yeah, we'll get there. So I was really lucky. I was able to take the 3 months of vacation I had saved up, and I still had a family member at that time who told me that I was using my brother's death as an excuse not to work. And I remember, I still have so many feelings about it. But I remember my first thought, and still to this day, my thought is, what a privileged space for you to look at that from. What a privileged perspective for you to have, that you think that I am choosing to enjoy my summer and use my brother's death as an excuse to enjoy summer when I'm trying to find the bandwidth to get up and brush my teeth and give a fuck if I live or die.
My parents decided to do something for Brady's 1-year anniversary of his passing at the football field that he grew up playing football at. And so many people came out. It was so nice. We did like a moment of silence, and it was really beautiful. I'm not going to name names because I'm not going to start World War III in my family, but there was a family member who suggested to my parents, because they weren't going to be coming, and my parents were upset because it was a close family member, had suggested to my parents that they should probably move on. And
I have thoughts even hearing that now.
It just is like one of those things that I think about, and I'm like, you can't unsay that to your family. And
just like the same person, just like that family member who said that to me. Like, you can't unsay that. You can't take that back.
And just praying that they never experience what my sister, what my parents experience. Because if somebody told them to move on, to forget, to let it go, especially 1 year feels like a lot of time.
It feels like it's the longest year of your life. At least it was for me and my family. And
still now, you know, Brady's 5-year anniversary of his passing is going to be at the end of this summer, and 5 feels really scary also.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't even know where I'm going to be.
Well, it's half a decade.
It's just like,
it's scary.
I think what I realized with the time thing is that I think what gets me, so I live away from my family, so I didn't see Brady all the time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the not seeing him.
Yeah.
It's the access, it's the messaging, it's the ability to tell him about things, and knowing that he's involved, and knowing that I'm going to see him at the next whatever.
That's a whole episode in and of its own, like how grief fucks with your head and plays mind games with you. Yeah. That's
and
that makes that first year so long.
Right. And it's such a tricky back and forth thing, because even now I still feel like sometimes I feel like I haven't seen him in 10 years and I just miss him so much. And then other times I feel like I'm in that frantic 2 weeks and it's hitting me and I'm processing, and it's such a back and forth. Neither of them are great places to be.
Neither of them are very fun. No, and I think that's why it is like genuinely offensive. Like, let's just name it for what it is.
Right? Like,
it's offensive when you have not experienced this particular loss, because as we said before, and we will get into it further, but sibling loss is different than other losses. It comes with this layer that other losses come with, or don't come with, rather.
So let's get into that. So let's talk about the differences, because I think for me, it's the future aspect. Like, Brady and I were very close. Brady and my sister were also very close. Very different relationships again.
Yeah,
one
big
is
brother,
younger,
little
one is
brother.
older.
Yeah.
And like, Brady and I had plans, man. Like, we had things that we were going to do. We had pranks we were going to play on our parents. Like, we had things. We were a little mischievous. And so it's like we had things that we were going to do. And then like, you know, the more like real life stuff, right? Like, when you have a sibling that you have a healthy, comfortable, normal dynamic with, whatever, you know, you have that support system kind of built in. And so it's like, okay, I know I'm going to lose my grandparents. I know I'm going to lose my parents eventually.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have my siblings to go through that with. And then you just don't.
Yes.
And
it really fucks with your head.
And like, my
that was
brother,
never the plan.
and my brother was very much a family man. Very much wanted to settle down, have a family, have kids.
Our Gemini boys were very similar in that way.
Oh my gosh. And he didn't get that opportunity. And it's like this vision of nieces and nephews and raising our kids together and being able to be an aunt to his children, or having, I mean, my children aren't going to have
an uncle
that they would have been
the best uncle.
Yeah. Like, it's just like someone who would have loved nothing more than to be their uncle.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely a thing that I get caught up on. I have 2 younger cousins who are significantly younger than me. I mean, I'm about to be 30, and my youngest cousin is like a sophomore or junior. So there's a lot of time there, which was great, though. I mean, we were able to grow up in a very different dynamic, and it was really lovely watching my brother. Like, he was so good with them. And they love him. My cousins absolutely loved my brother. And I always remember watching that and in real time. And this is like, I'm like in my 20s, early 20s at this point. My brother's still 18, 19 as this is all going on. And I remember actively, like, at a family event, seeing him with my little cousins and being like, he's going to be the best uncle in the world. And what is really interesting, not interesting, but I think it adds a layer to the sibling loss. And there's so many, like, eclectic varieties of it. Like we were saying, like, you have your sister still, but for me and James, it was only me and James, and I'm never going to get a chance. I don't want to say that I'm never going to get a chance to be an aunt, because I am really lucky and really blessed. I have a lot of good people in my life. I have a best friend who just had the most beautiful baby girl, and I love her so much. And I am her auntie, but it's different. It's different. I don't get that chance to see James's kids. I'm never going to know what they might look like. That's gone. It's completely gone, and there's no way of getting it back. And that's what grief is. But it feels like it adds a whole layer when it's the person that you watched grow up, or the person that helped grow you.
Yeah. And with Brady, like, he was very vocal about wanting that. Like, he was very, like, he was looking for a wife. He was looking to, everything he was doing. I mean, he didn't drop out of high school, but he transferred over to doing homeschooling in high school because he wanted to be able to work so he could start
Providing.
Yeah. And so it's like, it's devastating to have that loss, but it's devastating to see that possibility, like, ripped away.
Yeah.
Especially from someone who really, really wanted it.
Yeah.
And
I think that's where this is a personal thing, and this could always change, but I think that's where I have struggled with my own guilt, because anybody that knows me has known from the age of, like, 12, I was always like, I'm not having kids. Who knows? Like, I might, at some point with the right person, that may change, but I have never wanted children. I still currently, about to be 30 years old, am not interested in being a parent. And there's a part of me that feels guilty about that, because my parents may not ever get the chance to be grandparents. And that's something that every parent wants, is they want to see their kids grow into their own family and have their own family. And I don't know if my parents are going to get that chance. And
it might just look different for you.
And it might just look different. That's true too. And it might just look different. But that's, like, another layer where it's,
that's also just the eldest sister.
Oh yeah, totally. That's the people pleaser, eldest sister playing in there.
Oh man, gotta love it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, because I know we've talked about this in the past, and we don't need to get too spicy about it. We could try not to.
We could if we want to.
Tell me, Kat, have you ever had an experience? Did you have an experience after James passed where you felt like your grief as a sibling and your experience was overlooked?
Yes, I know we both have. And I think actually what's really telling to me, even going back 3 years ago when we started working together after James died, this story that we're about to share with you guys was so telling to me that because it happened in the same context at the same place in the same setting. And it was just so parallel. And it was so abundantly obvious to me at that point, like, how overlooked this is. So I was at my brother's services, which, to paint a little bit of a backstory there, that was actually a whole situation in and of itself, because he died in 2020. So we were in the peak of a pandemic. Right. There were 10 people at most that were allowed at the wake. We couldn't touch each other. We couldn't breathe on each other. So we couldn't grieve together. Right. And then I
can't even imagine.
Oh gosh, it was still a thing. I'm really blessed and lucky that the people that showed up that day did show up. I will say that. I don't want to be focused on the negative, because there was a lot even in the spite of great loss and trauma, there was a lot to be grateful for. There were a lot of people who showed up for me, and I'm grateful for that. But it just added a layer. We couldn't grieve together. So then we go to the cemetery where, again, we can't grieve together because we all have to be like 10 feet apart. So the entire cemetery and the whole hill is just filled with people, which was beautiful and ominous all at the same time. And the priest that was there he was a great priest too. I want to be like super clear that I don't have any ill will towards this man. But it was very hurtful in the moment. It wasn't intentional. This particular moment reminds me of that saying, don't attribute to maliciousness what you can attribute to ignorance. But it hurt so bad in the moment. So this priest was a great man. He had actually lost his wife. He was a widower. And he had turned to the cloth, and that is like how he lived his life after he lost his wife. So he was a very like worldly person and really understood grief. I personally felt in a way that a lot of church people haven't always understood grief in my life. So it was really settling in that respect.
Yeah.
But then he did his gig, whatever priests do. He did his thing. And then he gave everybody in the family a gift, except for me, my parents, and my brother's girlfriend, who I love deeply to this day. I think of her as a sister. But my parents and my grandparents and my brother's girlfriend all got, I think it was a little tea light that had the parish on it, but also had something specific about grief on it. And then there was like a little other thing that they all got. And I got nothing. And it just felt very, very much like I was there to be a support to my parents and that I was not also grieving. That's how I felt like I was being viewed in that moment. Because I know that the church knew that he had a sibling. So there was that part of me that was like, well, why did you only bring 4 of them if you knew there were 5 of us here? Human error, to be fair, too. Like, that could totally be attributed to human error. But
then
it
maybe
felt
leave the
very
girlfriend
hurtful.
out. Not to be like that.
But especially in...
Segue to my story.
especially with what we're about to get into.
I'm going to have to give so many disclaimers.
Yeah, that's okay.
So my experience was very eerily similar.
Eerily.
We were all at Brady's service. It was pre-pandemic, so wall-to-wall people, so many people. I don't know how many people know this, but I actually spoke at Brady's service. I don't know how.
I would say that's intense. I couldn't do it for like a year or two after, so that's pretty badass, Kim.
I think I literally dissociated. Like, I don't know how I did.
Yeah.
It was something where I was given the opportunity, and I felt like I was going to regret it if I didn't. And
I can resonate with that.
And I went up and I spoke, and I just spoke to him. And
that's beautiful.
And the thing is with my story is I don't know who did this. It could have been my own grandparents. Like, I don't know. I don't know. But obviously, so it's my parents, my sister and I, my brother's girlfriend at the time, all in the front row. My brother's dog was there. We were very lucky to be able to get the dog in. And yeah, I mean, someone got flowers for my parents and for my brother's girlfriend. And my sister and I were like,
what the fuck?
And I think I especially took offense because, one, I'm the older sister and I'm incredibly protective of my brother.
Let's call it for what it is. As an older sibling, you help raise your siblings.
Yeah.
Let's just call it like it
and
is.
It really felt like that in those moments. Like, it wasn't just me grieving my brother and my future. It was grieving the memories of all of his firsts and like watching him grow up.
That beautiful little boy grow up. Yeah.
And the things that I know that our parents don't know.
Great, because like he couldn't trust them with it, but you were cool enough where he could tell you.
And I just remember sitting there in the church and being like, wow, and this is nothing against my brother's girlfriend at the time. We love her.
Yeah. Well, that's how we feel about my brother's girlfriend.
Yeah.
Like, it was nothing against
Like,
her.
we love her.
Yeah.
But I was sitting here like, I have loved this boy for his full 22 years.
Where the fuck are my flowers?
Like, and again, not to be the comparison, but it's like, she's been here for like a year.
No, and I can really understand that.
And
yeah.
yes, she is his future, but so am I. Mm-hmm. Like, we were going to do all of it together.
Yeah, and I think that is really this, like, it speaks to how forgotten we are as siblings. And I think also from my mental health background, it makes me think of, when people are neglected, almost, I don't want to say over the top, but almost the extra things they do to compensate for the fact that they're not getting that attention.
Yeah.
And like, you and I are not aggressive people. So for the two of us, even years later, to be like, what the fuck? Where was my candle and my flowers? Like,
yeah.
Because it was hurtful.
And
we were forgotten.
Yeah. And I would like to think that if roles were reversed and I was an outsider looking in, I would include the siblings. But you don't really know, right?
Yeah, it's yeah.
So it's like, I'm not holding it against anyone. Again, I don't know who.
No, it's not a personal thing. It's more of like this is just what we've experienced, and it's kind of just been a little shitty on this end of the experience.
And I do think that it's so interesting because I feel like with my experience, I felt so overlooked in some instances.
Yeah.
And then there were some instances where I felt incredibly seen. And then I realized that I was only being seen and looked upon because I was the oldest sister and I was being looked at to pick up slack because my parents couldn't handle it. And that's not saying they couldn't. My parents, we were all did everything together.
Yeah, do anything.
But like, I wrote my brother's obituary. And I picked out, I shouldn't say I picked out, we all did it together, but I had the final say on his urn, which is a box. I put him in some wood, but.
It's fitting. He would have wanted that though.
Yeah. And there's reasons for what we went with and all of that. But,
right, of course. Yeah.
But I was realizing, like, even when we were working with the church, when we were deciding if I was going to speak or not and organizing how the services were going to go, I was being super appreciative that I was being included, and then I realized I was only being included because I was being leaned on, and it was expected of me to step up.
That word.
And so I was like, oh, and then when I was just grieving and just trying to be at my brother's services, I don't get the flowers.
Yeah.
And like that is such a
no, it's well, and I think it's also hurtful, but it's also, I feel like people maybe don't realize how actually hurtful it is as the sibling. Like I said, like I had that one family member who was like, you're just using this as an excuse to enjoy your summer. And I was like, what? Like, what is this lady talking about? But I realized it's because I am expected to have it together.
Yeah.
Because I'm the oldest sibling. I'm the oldest daughter.
Yeah.
And what was also really like striking for me, particularly about our experiences with like not feeling seen, or not even not feeling seen, not being seen. Right. Not being seen, is it wasn't just our experiences. Like the lack of resources deeply speaks to how this is, I would actually oversay it's an epidemic. Yeah. I feel really confident in saying that it's an overlooked epidemic of a lack of resources for a very large group of people that deserve to have a resource.
And I wonder if the lack of resources is because all of the experiences can be so different.
Yeah.
Right? Like when a parent loses a child, not to say that the way of the loss can't be very different, obviously, but the dynamics of siblings is so nuanced. It's like the relationships can be so different, older, younger, have you had a falling out before? Do you have multiple siblings? Are there like 10 of you?
Yeah.
Is it just you and your sibling that you lost and now you're like an only child, right? Like the variation is much more broad. So it's like when I look at it from that perspective, I can understand, but I don't think that it's right.
Yeah, yes,
of
course. Yeah.
I think that that's why we felt almost like a responsibility to share at least our pieces, right? And our experiences, because even though we have similarities in that we lost our brothers and they were both very unexpected, tragic situations and very traumatic, they're still incredibly different.
Yes.
And that's not even cracking the door open on all of these different experiences. Even. There are just so many people that have so many different experiences and they have nowhere to look.
Nowhere, yeah.
And bringing it back to the resources that I did find available, which were just some, not just because they serve a purpose, but the Facebook groups, right?
Yeah, tell me about that because I am not on Facebook. I am, but I don't use it.
This is my experience, and I'm still a part of some of them, and there's only 2 or 3. They're not specific. It's just sibling loss.
Okay.
And when I was first added, when I first joined, I've never posted anything. My sister did post, and it was so interesting because I was obviously a part of it, and even just reading her perspective,
very different.
It's so different, and we lost the same person. But
you didn't because you lost your baby brother,
right?
And she lost her big brother.
It's really, really incredible. And the only thing that I would say about the Facebook groups, and if any of you are listening or watching and you're a part of these groups, this is not us knocking them. Please use the resources that do exist, even though they're very limited. It, to me, seems to be more of a space for release. And
like venting.
Venting, introducing yourself. It's a lot of people who like are just going through it. And it's just happening. And they're like...
I would imagine that's triggering to revisit after 4 or 5 years.
You do get the people commenting being like, I'm so sorry. And it's nice. You get that kind of support. But you're not really getting anybody pointing you in a direction of these are things you can do. This is where you can look like...
Because there's nowhere to look.
Right. And
except for here.
Hello, welcome. And so it's a lot of people kind of introducing themselves, talking about their siblings in that way. And then it's a lot of people just venting about triggering event. It's basically like a more personal like Reddit thread. It's just people being like, oh, my sibling passed away 6 months ago and their fiance has already moved on, or, like stuff like that. Yeah. And it's like, okay, but what are you doing for yourself? Like the external stuff is already so hard to navigate. Like I say all the time, if I didn't have my spiritual practice when everything happened with Brady, like I know for a fact I would not be here.
Well, and I didn't.
Yeah.
Let's actually talk about that really quick because that's when I came to you. Yeah. I didn't have a spiritual practice down, which is why I had 3 months of vacation time saved up to take off when my brother died, because I had no idea of what it was to have a concept of like work-life balance or self-care, like caring about myself. What is that?
Yeah.
So I didn't have a routine, which is literally why I did need to take 3 months off of work, because I completely crumbled. Right. I had nothing to stand on.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the experience of having something to catch me, but I can say in building up a spiritual practice and self-care practice, it makes a world of difference.
Yeah. The way that I would explain it for me is I had done so much work. I was 26 at the time, and I had done so much work on myself, not even just in a spiritual way, but just like, personal development and really getting clear on who I wanted to be. And I also had like a weird midlife crisis at 25, 26. So that propelled me.
Love a good quarter life crisis.
Oh my gosh. And then with my spirituality was like, I was going through a lot during that time in a very positive way, but everything was happening really rapidly.
Yeah.
And so the only way that I can really describe it is I feel like I had built myself up so high. And so while I was knocked down like 10 million pegs, I was still just keeping my head above water with the beliefs that I had kind of built up in myself and my connection with everything. And it didn't make it okay, and it didn't make it easier.
Right.
But I think that it made it survivable for me.
Well, and I think that's the thing that I learned through losing James is that it doesn't have to be great or even subpar for you to get through. Yeah. I mean, obviously, ideal situation, it's things are great and chipper and there's rainbows and butterflies all the time, but that's actually not the world we live in.
Yeah.
So like coming out of like to my point earlier of that humanness of that this or that or black or white, of just like letting it be and like respecting the process of grief, because it's very up and down and all over the place. And
I developed some weird tics. I don't think this is something that we can like do a full episode on, so I'll just touch on them. But I developed some weird temporary side effects.
My anxiety went through the fucking roof after.
So I had some physical effects though.
Oh, really?
It was so when I share everything that happened with Brady, it'll probably make more sense. But Brady's loss, as I mentioned in our episode 0, was very sudden, it was just an accident. And there was a lot of trauma around how I found out and just the process of everything. And I developed a temporary lisp. And I also developed an eye twitch.
High cortisol levels like can cause that's very interesting. Like from a psychological standpoint, that sucks, but it's very interesting.
The PTSD, man. So the lisp lasted maybe only like 2 or 3 months. The eye twitch lasted, I thought I was going to have it forever. I think it probably lasted almost the full first year, like 8 months probably. Also, this is coming from someone who, like, I'm not a smoker. I don't.
Yeah, you're a very healthy person. Like, you live a very balanced, healthy lifestyle. I would say that.
But I also am not like coping with anything. I'm not using any type of substance to like well, I did drink a lot during the pandemic, which we talked about, but
that was also post losing Brady.
Yes.
So that was also like in grief.
Yeah. We lost Brady in September of 2019, and then the world shut down in the next few months. So
do you want to talk about how, because we also have similar stories about how we were told and the trauma around being left out of that piece of it.
Yeah.
I'll go first if you want.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, I just feel like we both had very similar experiences. Like, I feel like our losses were very parallel.
Yes.
Very interesting. But for me, and it's tough. Like, I want to really preface this with, like, I am fully aware that everybody was doing what they thought was best. That's what we all do as human beings. So there is no shame or blame here.
We're always just doing the best with the information we have at hand.
Exactly. So there's no shame or blame here. This was just traumatic for me. But for me, I was at work all day at this job that I never took any time off from, that I was selling my soul to and giving everything to. And I was there all day long. Mind you, my brother died in the middle of the night, and he was not found until the next morning. So his roommate found him in the morning, then called his girlfriend. So his girlfriend knew, and then his girlfriend called my mom, and then my mom had to call my dad, which was horrible that they weren't together. Like that, I can't even imagine what that was like for them.
Same thing for my parents.
And my mom was frantic. She couldn't find my dad because my dad was out on a hike. My dad's a very outdoorsy kind of guy. So there was like that whole situation. And I was at work. And my mom, I believe, and I don't blame her for this. I can understand, where she was coming from, but her belief, I think, was the safest place for my other child, my only now living child, is at work. And as soon as she gets in that car, if she knows this, she's in danger because my mom knows me.
Yeah.
And if anyone had, and I will say this is the truth, because my mom doesn't know me well. If anyone had called me and told me what was going on, I would have gotten in the car and probably drive like a bat out of fucking hell for frankly no reason, because there's nothing that I would have been able to do. I couldn't bring him back to life.
Yeah.
But that's what sets in those moments of trauma and panic. So I'm at work all day and I'm leaving work, and this job had me working late. Most jobs in mental health, we tend to work a little bit later, especially if you're doing like community work. So I was leaving at like 5 or 6 o'clock at night, maybe even later than that. And my dad calls me and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I could just tell by the tone of his voice, like something was going on. Something wasn't right.
Yeah.
I actually thought it was one of my grandparents, because my grandparents, I'm
that's
blessed.
That's
right. That's the assumption, because that's how it's
normal,
biologically supposed to go.
That is normal thinking.
And I am so blessed. I've lived most of my years with all 4 of my grandparents.
Same.
My grandfather was the first to die of my grandparents. I still have 3 of my grandparents living, and they're all amazing people and have grown me into the person that I am, and I'm so grateful for them. But that was my thought. It was one of my grandparents, and I was like, "Oh, I'm
logical
thinking." So I'm on my way to my girlfriend's house at the time, and we're doing a Survivor night. This is what we loved to do. We still love to do it. It's a good time. And I'm on my way to her house. I was not living there at the time. But we were very serious, and I was staying there a lot. So my plan was to go over for the night and stay there for the night. And I will be honest, I was a little snappy with my dad. I had a long day, and I was like, "This is my plan. This is what I'm doing." And of course, my dad is in I just lost my son mode.
Yeah.
So my dad's not going to be like, "You have to come home right now." So he's like, "Yeah, okay, that's fine. You do whatever you want." And then I get a call back, and I believe I'm still in the car. I get a call back like maybe 20 minutes later, because I had a long drive home from this job. And it's maybe my dad. I think it's my dad, but I can hear my mom in the background. My dad's like, "You need to come home right now." And I'm like, "What the fuck?" And he's like, "You need to come home right now. You just need to come home." And that's when I start driving like a bat out of hell, because now I know something happened. And to also preface this with, I will get into this more as we talk more about our brothers, but my brother did struggle for a while with substances. The last year of his life was the worst and the hardest. So our relationship wasn't at the best place when this happened. And then once my dad called me and I could hear it in his voice, I knew it was my brother. I couldn't really let myself go there because I had to stay.
Because he wasn't telling you.
Right. Yeah, because he wasn't telling me. But I had to stay safe in the car, so I wasn't really letting myself go there. But I get home. My parents tell me, at this point, it's 8 o'clock at night. So everybody's known for like 12 hours. Everybody has known. My parents, my grandparents, my roommate, his roommate, not my roommate, his roommate, who was also one of his best friends. And I love his roommate. His friend, Corey, I love you. So it's not about shame or blame or like animosity towards anybody.
It is hurtful.
But it was hurtful. I was the last person to know. I went about my whole day solving everybody else's problems, because that's what I do as a mental health worker. Whether I'm a group home manager or community worker, I'm always helping people solve their problems. So I'm spending my day fixing other people's lives, and I come home to find out that mine is completely fallen apart, and I'm the last to know about it.
Right.
And that was the hardest pill to swallow.
Not only are you the last one to find out, but he's been gone.
He had been gone for over 12 hours at that point. He had been gone for, a whole day.
I definitely think the chain reaction is very parallel to our stories. There are some things that are different.
Very, yes.
So I was living in Quincy.
Yeah.
With my good friend, who we were roommates at the time, and Mike, my then boyfriend, now husband.
AA.
lived in Drake. And so that's like an hour
Oh, yeah.
distance. And I didn't have a car.
And Drake is in the woods for anybody who doesn't know.
When
There's no
I
highways
tell
near us.
you, when I tell you that I'm so grateful he was with me when all of this happened. Like, I wish he wasn't, because I wish he didn't have to see me.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that way. And also Allie, my roommate, my friend, was with me, which I'm so thankful for. But again, it's like such a back and forth, because it's like I really wish that I didn't like put them through that. I know they wouldn't say that.
Well, I think that also is like a piece of the older sister sibling thing where I don't know about. Well, I do know about you. We talk a lot. But there's always this layer of dealing with things alone as the oldest sibling.
Yeah, and not wanting to ask for help or
Not
rely on
burden
people.
anybody.
I don't want to put this on you. So I was living in Quincy. I had already gotten home from work that day. It was the evening, and Allie and I were in a pretty solid routine. We would go right to the gym from our train station. We would meet off the train and walk to the gym, and then we would grab a bus home. And so we went to the gym. We did our workout. Mike came down to have dinner. I think he was going to spend the night that night. We kind of were just seeing each other 3 or 4 times a week, just depending on our schedules. And that was a night that he was coming down to either spend the night or he was going to pick me up and we were going to come up here. And I went to my workout. I went back home with Allie. Mike met up with us. We all made dinner. We had dinner together. We just sat down to watch some junk TV, I'm sure. Probably The Bachelor, because it was a Monday. And I had a missed call from my mom. And I was like, that's weird. She doesn't just call me. Like, she'll usually text me or message me or be like, call me when you get home, or, you know. And then I think there was another missed call from her, or I had gotten a text from her being like, you need to call me. And I was like, I assumed it was my dad, weirdly. But I think at that time, my dad had some health stuff going on. So I was like, oh my God, is my dad in the fucking hospital again? Like,
Right.
you know, and I got worried in that way.
Again, though, being logical, right? Because
you're working with what you have.
We're like, gonna lose our parents first. Yeah, that's where your brain goes.
And I didn't even think it was that dramatic either. I thought maybe, like, I don't know,
maybe an injury, maybe, right.
I've also got the endorphins going. I just worked out, like, so I'm just like living my best life. And also, I was really working on my mindfulness then. So I was like, I'm not gonna anticipate something until I know what I have to be upset about. I was really, you know. And also, I had just seen Brady like a week before. He was just with me. So he's not in my radar for things to be wrong. And I called my mom back and she's screaming. And she's like, you need to come home. And I was like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? I'm already crying. I don't even know why, but I'm hearing my mom like that.
How upset your mom is. Yeah.
And she just said, Brady's dead. And I felt my body, like I felt my brain do all the things. Like,
yeah, I feel like I remember physically feeling my body shut down. Like, I literally, when people talk about falling to the floor in grief, I always thought that was like
I did
thing
that.
of the movies.
No, I did that.
And I did. Yeah, no, I did too. In the garage of my parents' home, I fell completely to the ground and I couldn't get back up for like a solid minute.
Yeah, I had a really weird, I don't know, like I felt this switch. So I'm like, I think I said to my mom, she just kept saying like, you need to come home. Like, I think she was trying to be like, do you understand?
Yes.
Yeah. Because she also, I think, so backtracking a little bit, similar to your story, my brother had actually just passed though. It was like 6 p.m. and I was talking to my mom at 9 p.m., that kind of thing.
But you were in Boston and they were in Maine, so that's what adds that time.
And so I didn't get there until much later in the evening. But the sheriff had gone to where my brother was living, which was with his girlfriend, and they told her. And meanwhile, they had another sheriff on their way to meet my mom, but my parents live in the woods.
Yeah, like in the woods of Maine.
Like 2 hours plus out from anywhere close to where they were. So, it's not judging my brother's girlfriend.
No, it's just about feeling forgotten, feeling left out.
But she called my mom.
My brother's girlfriend also had to call my mom and let my mom know because the police didn't.
Well, the police were on the way to my mom. My mom was alone.
Yeah, I think both of our moms were. Yeah. Both of our moms were alone.
My mom was alone. My sister drove right over. She lives like a half hour away, and my dad was at work in the mill. I don't know what happened on that end. I just know what my mom has shared with me. But my mom found out on the phone from my brother's girlfriend and then called me.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine. Like, I'm not a parent and
because she couldn't call my dad because he's at work.
No, he's at work.
And he also, his work is like half hour, 45 minutes away.
Well, I think that's what went through my mom's brain too, is when I think this is what I've like perceived through my like mental health kind of side of it, is that it seems like when that happens, their immediate thought, I know my mom's immediate thought was like, Catherine needs to be safe. Yeah. Kat needs to be safe.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that your mom was probably there too. Like, the rest of them need to be safe.
Yeah. And so my mom called me. I didn't answer the first time she called. So she called my sister. I don't think she told my sister over the phone. I think she told my sister when my sister got there. It's all kind of blurry, honestly. And my meme, who's no longer with us, but she went to the mill to get my dad, who is my dad's mom.
I would say, and all the layers to that, I can't imagine being a parent going to pick up your son to tell your son that his son.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I don't think that they told him until they were home, but I think he knew something was wrong with one of us.
Oh, yeah.
But so my meme is going to get my dad and bringing him home to my mom. My sister's on her way. I get a hold of my mom. She tells me what's happening. My mom is waiting for the state trooper now to come and tell her, even though she knows.
She already knows.
And like, what do you do? She was she was alone for 10 minutes. Like,
my mom was alone for like, I can't even imagine. My mom was alone, I think, for like almost an hour, maybe even longer, because she was at our home when my brother's girlfriend called her.
Yeah.
And she had to get in the car and drive to downtown. Well, my brother wasn't living in downtown Lowell, but he was living in Centerville.
Yeah.
Which is far enough from where my parents live. My parents live in the woods of Drake-It. Right. So, and by far, I mean, no, it's not a far drive, but when you know that your kid's dead and you're driving to their apartment, I can't imagine how fucking far of a drive that feels.
Yeah. So my mom tells me that Brady's dead, and it's not funny, but I just, you do weird stuff when your brain shuts off. I told my mom, I'm pretty sure I said something like, I can't do this. Like, I literally.
Right, because any of us can do this right now, Kim.
Like, I was fully like, no.
No.
Like, no.
I don't accept this reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, trauma does really crazy shit to your brain.
And my mom is
insane.
Like, you need to come home.
Yeah.
While she's having her own, like, meltdown, obviously.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't do this.
You know what's really funny? I feel like you and I had a similar conversation with both of our parents in that sense, where my dad was asking me to come home. I had a terrible day at work. I also hated this job, but it was my first like real big girl job where I was like, I'm utilizing the degree that I was told to go get. That is useless. But anyway,
we do what we do.
It's just interesting. I think about that now. Of course, I wasn't thinking about it at the time, but I think about it now and like how hard that must have been going through your own process of, oh my God, my kid's dead, and now I have to call my other kid and tell my other kid that their sibling's dead and I need you to come home. And we're on the other ends of the phones being little shits. And we're like, doesn't sound like a good idea to me.
And it was totally coming from like trauma brain.
Oh,
like,
yes.
It was,
absolutely.
It wasn't me being like I just,
no,
everything shut off and my brain was like, nope, can't do this, not doing this, like not accepting this. And then I fell to my knees and I screamed, sobbed. I don't know. I'd have to ask Mike. He was in the room and he came in the room right after me when he saw me freaking out. And then I told him and then he was crying and then Allie came in. It was like a domino effect. Like it was just, and then I remember being on my knees in my bedroom and I had been crying for like a minute or two. And then all of a sudden, like a switch flipped in my head and I stopped crying and I stood up and Allie and Mike looked at me like I was crazy.
You okay?
And I was like, I need to go. And then I was like, I think I'm going to throw up first. I walked to the bathroom. I threw up and then I came back in the bedroom and like ready to start packing my bag.
That's really funny because I also had a similar experience where it dropped to my knees. I couldn't breathe for a minute. I was like literally hyperventilating. I actually thought I was gonna make myself pass out because I was really having a hard time catching my breath. I was on all fours, wailing, and eventually I got up. I went upstairs with my parents, and they were like, "What are you gonna do?" And I was like, "Jess is coming to pick me up." Because they know me where they were like, she's not going to sit here with us. And I was like, Jess is coming to pick me up. And like literally within, and I feel actually I have guilt about this. I've processed it with my parents. So like we're fine and we're through it. But I couldn't be with them because I couldn't handle their trauma and their loss because I was just trying to like make sense.
You're just trying to process everything. Yeah.
So I think within an hour of my parents telling me, I had my girlfriend pick me up and we left. And I didn't even stay at my parents' house that night. Because I couldn't be in that home. I did for a long time after, but that first night I could not.
I totally get that. My parents don't live in the childhood home that we grew up in. My sister actually lives in our old house. And I can't go there. I've only been there once. I don't know how she lives there, honestly.
I was gonna say, kudos
that's
to her.
That's a whole other thing.
I don't know if I could do that.
But yeah, no, I literally I threw up. I came back in the room. Bless Allie. Oh my gosh, she was literally packing a bag for me already. Oh. She's like, I don't know how long you're going for. I'm gonna pack black clothes. So if you stay up there until after the service, like whatever. She just went into. She's a Virgo. She went into full.
We love our Virgos.
She went into full like mom mode. And
problem solver.
I'm very, very grateful for her. And then I'm also very grateful that Mike was with me because if he wasn't
easily not been,
he would have been up here. He still would have gone up to Maine with me, but he would have had to come down to Quincy,
come down to Boston, drive back up past Drake.
And then so it just really like I'm so grateful he was with me. We got in the car and he didn't even have any of his stuff with him. We literally went up and we went to Walmart the next day and bought a bunch of like sweatpants and sweatshirts and just like lived in that. Like it was really crazy. But then we got up to, by the time we actually got to my family's house in Maine, it must have been like 1 a.m. And because it's like a 3.5 hour drive.
It's up there.
And from Quincy, it's a little bit longer. And so by the time we actually left and it was like 1 a.m. My grandparents were all there. And I remember walking in and we didn't know what happened to Brady, which I'll get into when we like talk about his whole situation. But there was a lot of layers to the trauma, I think, because my brain was spiraling because I was talking to my mom and she's like, we still don't know what happened. And
I can't imagine the horror of
like
not
we
knowing
knew some details
because he's so young. So like something
well,
happened.
and like we knew kind of what happened, but we knew he was at work, but we didn't know what happened fully. And then we didn't know how long it had been. We didn't know if he was alone. We didn't know, like there were just a lot of like moving parts and missing pieces. And so
I think that's the hardest thing about that is you want to know.
Yeah.
Not that it makes it better, but there's almost, it almost,
there's like
having
a clarity.
An answer. Yeah.
And so the whole 3.5, 4 hour drive up, I'm just reeling. Like, was he alone? Was he in pain?
Suffer?
Like, and how long was he out there? Was he like stuck and needed help and people just didn't know?
Yeah, I definitely went through that. I mean, yes, James was an overdose, and I knew how he died, and I still had all those same thoughts. I remember thinking like, did he suffer?
Was it on purpose?
Was it on purpose? Did he choke?
Yeah.
Did he just fall asleep?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think from what I gather, that's like a very normal part of grief.
Yeah.
But it's just.
And then me being me, like I remember walking in. Well, first of all, I remember walking into my parents' house and my whole family is there, and I just expected Brady to be there.
Oh yeah.
Like those feelings, and then also because we didn't know what happened and because we didn't have proof yet. There was like maybe it's a mistake. Maybe it's not him. Maybe
it was somebody else
running around and we don't know how to get a hold. No one's tried to call him, right? Like maybe he's gonna pull into the driveway and be like, "What's everybody doing? Kim, why are you home?" Like, there was a lot of
mind
that.
games. Your mind will play on you. I remember for months I was like, he's just in jail. He just made a bad decision.
I had dreams that Brady was in jail.
I remember you telling me that.
Like my brain like processing it. Yeah. So yeah, I like got to the house and just expected him to be there. Expected it to be a mistake. I was waiting for someone to call and be like, it wasn't him. Like,
right.
You know, like we cleared it up. Like,
right.
Yeah. And it's just like a weird thing. And then me being me, like I walk in and I had green hair at the time. I had my dark, like emerald green hair.
I remember.
And I remember, again, he had just been down to visit me the week before.
Yeah.
And I remember walking in and like, I was not giving it. Again, I'm not like the emotional one in my family, right? Yeah. I'm a very emotional person.
I'm the same. We're the same in that way. We're both super emotional people, but when it comes to me being around my family, I think it's also an older sister
rock.
thing.
You're the one that holds it together. And I remember walking in and being like, well, I can never have my hair any other color because Brady said he liked it like this. Like, what the fuck?
Such a you thing to say.
What the fuck, dude? So, you know.
So that's actually really funny because that reminds me of a really funny thing I said the night that James died, or the day. So that night we're at my parents' house. We're getting subs delivered because I'm waiting for Jess to come pick me up. And also, like, none of us want to eat, but because of what I did for work, I actually hadn't eaten all day. Also, ADHD, don't ever eat usually until I need to. So I hadn't eaten all day. And I was also a very strict vegan at that time in my life. And I was a sobbing mess. I was actually surprised that I was being so like open and honest and with my feelings and my tears, and I was sobbing, and they were like, "What do you want from Stachy's?" Stachy's in Salem. It's great, by the way. And I'm like, James loves steak and cheese. I want the biggest steak and cheese with onions.
Oh my god. Throw it all away.
No, I ate the whole thing.
No, I mean throw away the veganism.
Oh yeah. I was no longer vegan after that.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of those things. So going back to like the PTSD thing, right? Like the processing, I felt like I was so hyper aware of everything, and then I was like, oh, this is new. I have a lisp, and this is new. I have an eye twitch, and like it just was such a process. And then again, to just like bring it all back, how am I having this visceral of an experience and everyone is still overlooking me?
Yeah.
How am I living this reality and I am not being asked if I'm okay? I am not being asked.
That's the biggest thing, being asked if I'm okay. I mean, maybe I definitely had my parents checking in on me. I think that's a very normal thing when you go through this as a family. Your core family unit is like, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you taking care of yourself? But yeah, from those outside parties.
I will say, to give credit, I had one of my mom's very, very good friends. They've been friends since like childhood. She came over the day after and she like took a moment with me and with Kaylee and was like she just made us feel very seen, and all of that went away out the window afterwards.
Yeah,
and I think it's tricky, right? Because like with what you're saying with close family, like with grandparents and stuff, they're all grieving very different. Like not only are they losing a grandchild, but they're watching their child go through this. And like,
oh God, I can't even imagine.
And then obviously the parents going through losing a child. And with me, it was like me and my sister's dynamic was super strained all of a sudden. And there's a lot of moving parts. Then I think it's like not getting the recognition from the outsiders.
Yes. Yeah. And I feel like at least what I got a lot was, how are your parents doing? And it's like, well, obviously my parents are
not okay.
A wreck. But in case you were wondering, I am also a fucking wreck.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
I think it's just one of those things where it's like the family unit is a unit and there aren't more important pieces than another. And so it's not like, at least in the family I grew up in, like we're all limbs to the same tree. You know what I mean? Like we are all a team. Yeah. And so I understand why the focus is put on the parents, but I don't think that it should be only.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Well, especially when you look at the lack of resources, like, right, to recap all of it, it's like the lack of resources, but also how many similar experiences did you and I have within that process of...
That were very different experiences still.
Yeah, very different and very similar. I mean, the priest forgot you, or maybe somebody else forgot you. I know the priest forgot me. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm LGBTQ and, you know, I'm going to burn.
The only way in my mind I can think of where this would be okay, but I still don't think it would be okay, is if it was like a family member of the girlfriends who came. But then I'm like, wouldn't you be extra inclusive? Like, wouldn't you want to be extra, like...
Right. Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I just don't see that being the situation. I don't know who it was.
Yeah,
I don't think it matters, though.
No, it doesn't matter. No, it doesn't. It's just that we both had that experience. There's so few resources. Hopefully we are creating a resource for people.
I really hope so.
Not only to hear what we have to say, and hopefully you guys know that you're not alone, because
just validating your feelings, because it's okay to be pissed about being overlooked. It is so bizarre. It's so bizarre to go through the most transformative and traumatic experience of your life and have people be like, but are you taking care of your parents?
Right. Or what I got a lot was like, well, what are you doing for work? Because like, not only did I take those 3 months off, and we will get into this at another time, but there was a different job I got into. Yeah. And there was so much of a focus of people being like, so what are you doing with your career? And I was like, bitch, I'm trying to put one foot in front of the other right now.
I'm trying to literally survive. Well, if you guys have had your own experiences where you felt overlooked in this process, comment.
Yeah,
below.
Please send us your stories.
If there's anything juicy, we will absolutely use it to react to, because some of the things that we've talked about with other people that we know, and again, we have a few guests lined up to talk about their own experiences, but some of these stories are so offensive and so unexpected. Like it's so like, and again, it's never coming from an intentional place.
Right. Do not attribute to maliciousness what you can attribute to ignorance.
It's really just people don't think about the sibling perspective. So we're here to change that.
Fuck yeah, we are, man.
All right. Well, we will see you all
next episode.
Next time. Thanks for watching and listening.
Bye.